Probably.
For those of you online, we'll be starting in just a couple of minutes.
Is anybody online too? Well, Claire's online. I think you should be Other people, I just don't. I never knew as well. No. I'm not sure.
Hello, everyone.
Oh.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. If you're out there, come in.
It's cold outside.
It's not working. All right. Well, welcome to our DC North American continent launch of Open Schools Kenya. As you'll see, we launched last week in Nairobi, and we're going to play a little video showing you how that went. Let's see. Well, I kind of want to set the context with this video, but first, I just want to tell you how this project came to be. So it was about, what, a year and a half ago. A team of us applied to a Gates Grand Challenge. If you don't know what that is, it's Gates Foundation putting out a call for kind of innovative, exciting ideas. And it was Feedback Labs that kind of initiated this. So Feedback Labs consists of a number of us here at the OpenGov Hub and members who are working on things like citizen feedback. So there were several of us, a lot of people in this room, who worked on this proposal. And as it turned out, we won the challenge. And the challenge was all about data interoperability. So we had to propose something that was about how do these different data sets talk to each other in the realm of open data or any sort of data for development. So our big idea was turned into Open Schools Kenya. It didn't have the name at the time. So that's kind of the origin of it, and the members that ended up working on it together out of Feedback Labs Association for ourselves, Ground Truth Initiative, Development Gateway, which both of us are here at the Hub, and Map Kibera. So that's the Kenyan organization that's done most of this work in the field. So we kind of consider it like a collaboration, and that's why we have many different sides. Because also thanks to the OpenGov Hub, we never probably would have met or even necessarily formed the Feedback Lab in the first place out of people working here at the Hub. Yeah, so thanks to thanks to Nathaniel, actually, who's here, who started the Gov Hub along with Development Gateway. So I want to talk about the project itself. I guess I might as well share about that now, and then I'll play the video. Seems to make sense. So the project really came together around schools data in Kenya. So what we were thinking, as I mentioned, is, how can we make different data sets interoperable? So you'll find data all over the place, and especially now it's sort of like the age of data, data revolution, all these buzzwords, big data, but oftentimes when you actually try to figure out, well, how do you get one set to talk to the next, and how do you actually make it useful, you find that everything's just kind of off here and off there, and it's really hard to make use of actual information. So we wanted to have sort of a use case and show how this could actually work in our minds. So we chose schools data in Kenya. Kenya mainly because of Map Kibera. So I was also one of the founders of Map Kibera. And I knew that we had a solid team that was used to working with geographic data, any kind of data in Kenya. So we chose that location for that reason. We chose schools really, we just thought, we need a sector that's sort of where the data is fairly visible, like it's fairly public. So what we're talking about here is like open public data, not private data that's tricky. Like sometimes health data gets more into personal information and things like that. So we thought schools are pretty visible. You kind of walk down the street, you see a school at a sign. It's public information, and it's a public good. So we chose those two to basically demonstrate how information can come together around a subject from many different sectors. And I'm going to show you the resulting platform that came out of that. And as you walked in, you may have seen the resulting map printed on the table there. If you haven't, you can look at it as you go out. Where's James, who designed that map? This guy here designed that map, did the cartography. So we were able to actually not only have an online resource, which was developed by the portal developed by Development Gateway, but we also have print. And that's really essential to sort of give back the information to the community. So next week, actually, the team in Kenya will be taking those map prints and carrying them to every school. So 333 schools in Kibera are going to have a poster that shows all the schools in Kibera and put on their wall. So let me just play this video that tells you a little more about the sector of education, and then I'll go into a little bit more about this project.
Want to have responsible and successful leaders tomorrow? A bright future ahead? Well, educate your child today.
It's the high time that the population realize that it's through education that we can bring permanent change. And that means we really have to invest quite a lot in the education of our children, or of the children within the slum.
Education is the most important way of ensuring success in life. Yet it's not easily accessible as it should be for many children in the informal sector, such as Kibera.
Shule kupata Kibera ni ngumu. Mashule siku hizi zinajaa, kuna kupata nafasi na public schools haipata. Si rahisi.
From the school heads and authorities we talked to, we learned that there are only 3 public schools in Kibera.
In Kibera, we only have 3 public schools. That is only Kibera, Ayandi, and Olympic.
We noted that most schools in Kibera are highly populated, especially the few public schools.
Honestly, because of the introduction of the primary education, I think most schools in the slums have suffered. Because there's been an influx of children from other schools to those that used to do well. The case in point is Olympic primary, right? That one has suffered greatly. When it used to cater for just about 45 children per class, now you're talking of 90.
So parents often turn to other privately operated schools in Kibera to educate their children. There are more than 250 private and informal schools in Kibera. Some are run by the churches, some by the organizations, and others remain informal.
The bigger population of children with few educational institutions within Kibera, especially the public ones. So people have to rely on the private education, those in non-formal schools.
Parents go the extra mile to find information on schools that offer quality education that most of them wish for their children to get. But getting the accurate information sometimes proves to be a challenge. Most of them rely on the second-hand information from other parents.
So before you take a child, they are left to inquire to some other parents. Yeah.
We try to look at some of the factors parents mainly consider before taking their children to any school.
Kitu ya kwanza lazima uangalie security, uangalie majengo, uangalie cleanliness. Kitu ya pili ni uangalie education ikoaje.
My first priority is the studies.
Venye wanafundisha, unajua pia lazima kufundisha venye wanafundisha, venye mtoto wanakula, unaona venye wanatreat mtoto.
Kwanza naangalia nikipeleka mtoto huko, ataenda akitoka hapo atatoka na nini.
Different schools face different challenges, and the challenges vary from school to school.
First, you're limited because of the space. So that means we can only admit a certain number of children at a certain period. And then the environment is also not friendly. You can hear that music, you can assume the kids are in this class. So the environment is not that friendly, especially to the school.
So we have a problem of textbooks. We don't have adequate textbooks. And the problem is further aggravated by the inability by parents to afford to buy them or even pay for the school to buy them. So that's a chronic problem.
You realize that we have quite a number of children once they finish class 8. They're just struggling with the slums, and they get themselves in drugs, others in violent robbery.
We also would like to repair the classes. They are not in a good condition.
We find one class which it has been partitioned, so that when another teacher teaches the other side, another one teaches there, there is distraction. So that one hinders quality education.
You go to a class, it's empty. And it's empty because the teacher cannot sacrifice money to make Manila, buy Manila paper and write, or buy the helmet and come and write.
Most teachers in Kibera understand the situation that parents face.
What we have to remember that these students, majority of them come from Kibera. And Kibera, we live here, so we know the challenges that they are having. One of them is paying school fees.
Cost, poverty. The parents are poor, so they can't afford to pay, to cater for the needs, for the finances, stationery, and everything with regard to school.
Parents and school leaders have different ideas about what might help improve the situation.
Somebody, a well-wisher, a development partner, to come on the ground and help.
The government, is it the government who are going to help us? The government should do that.
We believe Kibera students can raise up above it. But all they need is support, encouragement.
So it's not until something is rightfully done. Good quality education in the slum will remain a topic that is only talked about, but never achieved.
All right, so that was a video that some of our team members did in the beginning of the project to just set the scene. And obviously it was done during the process of, they actually were going to different schools, they were talking to teachers, as you saw. They were kind of taking a survey in the beginning just to find out what people were interested in, what were the issues in education, and what kind of data might be useful. So that's the content of that was edited into the video. So let's see. Okay, I'm just going to go down to the map. This is our lovely website. As you can see, it's called Open Schools Kenya, not Open Schools Kibera. So we actually, while we focused heavily on Kibera, we intended for this to be something that could happen across the country and be housed here. The reason being that we think that this kind of method could be easily, or at least potentially, maybe not so easily, but it definitely could be replicated. So essentially the process here, as you saw, there was sort of this preliminary research, which was also to find out what the interest of parents might be in data. So a lot of times we talk about open data. Well, Kenya in particular has been a leader in open data. They've done a kind of big open data portal called Open Data Kenya several years ago that released a bunch of information. And they're kind of trying to make trying to be a leader in the realm of open data. So we actually took that information as a guide as well. So there's an education data set within that portal that we took and we included in our site. So that's, I guess you could say, the interoperability part. We actually took each school from their open data set and matched it to the data that was collected by our team. Now the process for our team, they actually went to each and every school and mapped it. So Map Kibera has been working for several years now using OpenStreetMap. I'm going to guess that most of you know what it is, but just in case you don't, it's sort of like Wikipedia for maps. Anyone can edit the map, anyone can add information, and our team has been adding Kenya information for since 2009 to this map. So actually a lot of the schools were already there, but they had mapped them, our team had mapped them in about 2009 or 10. Things have changed. The Open Data Kenya people, who did the whole country, they had done that in 2007. So their data was already 7-8 years old. And so we matched these together. And then in terms of what kind of data we want to collect, we combined the interests of parents. As you saw, they kind of are interested in, well, some of it's not that easy to collect, just going to the school, like how good the quality is. So instead we collected things like the numbers of teachers and students to look at the ratios. We actually did manage to collect school fees, which is mostly because that's what parents want to know. It's a very difficult issue because Kenya supposedly has free universal primary education. So they're not actually supposed to have a fee to educate children. Of course, private schools can charge fees, but even the public schools often come with a price tag that's not technically a tuition fee, but other types of fees. So we tried really hard to get information that could be useful to those parents, but also say to the policymakers who have this 2007 data. Maybe they don't know, and as we found out from presenting this last week, they don't know how many informal schools there really are, where they are. As you can see on the statistics there, they collected 339 schools. And this Kibera is about 2.5 square kilometers. So that's a lot of schools. Everything's kind of very condensed, of course. There's also, we think there's about 250,000 people that also live in that 2.5 square kilometers. So everything's kind of on a small scale and condensed together, and every square inch of space is taken up by something. You can also kind of tell by the map that a lot of them, this line here, that's a railway line, this kind of wavy line through the middle of it, and a lot of the schools were kind of situated right along it, which is interesting. So you can kind of also see the distribution. The railway line, it operates as a railway, but not very often, so it's almost like a street or a highway through the slum in a way. But that's also important because there's a lot of upgrading work that's being done in Kibera. One thing that they're doing is trying to widen the girth of the railway. So a lot of those schools might be taken down. So I think I'll just go into one. Let's see. So basically, this is how the site works. Each school is given a profile, and within the profile we have 3 photographs. They're all the same. There should be like one, well, in this case they don't seem to have a classroom, but it should be one classroom, one outside, one of the compound, and one of the kind of the sign or the outside on the street view. And then it's got the location, of course. And then here we have the data that the team collected in OpenStreetMap. So in this case, primary school, it has the operator, it has the government registration, which basically means in this case it's the Ministry of gender, culture, social development, so not Ministry of Education in this case. So we found very few that were actually Ministry of Education registered. They're mainly registered as a kind of like a CBO or NGO with that department. All the detail, then we have the student population, the teacher population, some infrastructure, whether it's accessible by a vehicle or not, material it's made of, toilet, electricity, and finally if it has certain special programs. Feeding program, that's a big one that the parents wanted to know about. They care about whether there's a feeding program, obviously, for lunch. Some of the older students would care if there's like sanitary towel program, these kinds of things. So side by side we put this with the Open Data Kenya, and I'm just going to guess they're probably, and then we put a tab here to compare the two. Okay, good. So in this case, this does show up in Open Data Kenya as well. So you can actually compare them. So from this, for example, the number of students tends to be quite different. Now, this is 2007, 2014. It could be because of that. It could be because of the reporting count changing. I mean, we can't necessarily know why there's a discrepancy of data, whether it's that the school kind of shrank, which is definitely possible. But basically what we wanted to do is just show that you can have this data kind of together, and you know, if you're going to be a policy researcher, you want to get to the bottom of it, then that's up to you. If you're a parent or a school administrator, if you're a school administrator, you want to make sure that it's correct. So that's why we basically ended up forming kind of a loose affiliation with every school. So as you could see, the guys went around to every school. They got to know the person that they talked to. They had to kind of form a relationship. So the basis for the sort of conceptual basis here is that citizen data is different than, you know, if you're going to send out your government official or your USAID person, like which is what happened with the previous data set, to a place like Kibera, they may not capture the same quality of information as people that live there. The people that live there, now this is not just random crowdsourced people, this is actually a team. They are kind of taking a different level of responsibility for accuracy. So even though this data is actually housed in OpenStreetMap, so it's housed in an editable database, but they're sort of like the eyes and ears on that database and on the community, which is not the case with the people that, I mean, it's a group that did it with USAID in 2007. They're not any longer there. And when they did get this data, well, if you want to know where the school was, they weren't necessarily always able to go to that exact spot to find the school, we discovered. So some of their placements are in wrong places. I mean, not really, really wrong, but if you really need to figure out, for example, the Ministry of Education mentioned they do support some of these informal schools. They give some of them funding. They're not 100% sure where those schools are and whether they exist anymore. So that kind of issue, you do need sort of that kind of accuracy. And you need to know who you can call. If you just call the school proprietor, I mean, that's some level of verification. But if you can call on a group that's like Map Kibera, actually lives in the community and is sort of a data, knowledgeable about general data, then you have a kind of second layer of authentication. So this is basically to show that, you know, people think of like citizen data as kind of soft or less reliable, but actually in many ways it can be much more reliable than what's considered official data. That's one thing that we wanted to show. But at the same time, combining these sets together is obviously better than just having one or the other. I just want to show you. So we also included a comment field. Now, this is what we want to do really in phase 2. Well, first of all, we have data updates. You can share your data updates. So every school will be, when they give the print map, they also will show them their page on the site and say, well, here's where you could click to share a data update. But of course, they can also just contact the team. They can have their phone numbers. It doesn't have to be that they go find a cyber cafe or computer to share a data update, but it can also come through here. And if it does come through here, it goes to the team, not directly to OSM. Comment fields, now this is something that we did sort of as a trial with this phase. Ultimately, what we kind of wanted to happen here is for parents to be able to make comments on the school. Facebook comment on the school, slightly valuable. We kind of did it as a test. We had people try it out, talk about it, see if this was going to be useful to them. We discovered that probably that's not the best way to collect that kind of feedback. So in order for this to be a real feedback project, we want to like kind of design this in a more structured way. But ultimately, it was something people were interested in, like the parents. I mean, ultimately, how do you gauge the quality of these kind of small schools? If you don't have, you can have people actually say, well, is this aspect quality, or did my, at least did the teachers show up every day, something like that. So these are the kind of things we want to build into the next phase. We haven't figured it all out, but we did get at least the basic idea across and see if people wanted to do it, and the answer was positive. Even teachers and school proprietors were, I mean, of course they'd be a little more skeptical. They don't want negative comments. And it's definitely true that people can kind of have personal reasons for commenting negatively. As we know, if you use any sort of Yelp or whatever, Amazon. So we wanted to kind of build that out into our next phase in the most responsible way possible. But it's also true that, they were willing to have their name associated with comments with parents. So, I mean, they're members of the community. So this is again where I think building this kind of project on a community by community basis lends it a lot of value that can't be done in other ways. So they're kind of held responsible to their own community members. They can't really go totally off the rails one direction or another. Let's see. So I think I have one more very short video to show you. I'm sure, well, let me just play with this one more time. So if you go to education level, for example, you can sort by different features. So say like we want to look at only secondary schools, and then the summary will also change. So you can also see how many there are. And then if you want to sort secondary schools that are government, there's 2. So there they are. So we can also do this nice sorting. And of course, next development phase, we could add different kinds of sorting by this and that, but we wanted to keep it really simple for our current audience, which is, I would say, number 1, parents, school teachers, school proprietors. Number 2 would probably be policymakers. And of course, you can also visit the data. So in true open data fashion, you can also download the nice PDF of the map cartography. You can download from OpenStreetMap. You can download a CSV file of all of the information. Okay, so let me go ahead and just do one more little. So this is what really, I guess last week when I was in Kenya really got me excited was we kept presenting this and showing the print map and everything to a lot of different people in government especially, and they were all extremely excited about it because they don't already know this stuff. So, we weren't sure, like we tried to get in touch with them before, but until you have something you can show them, they're kind of like, oh yeah, that sounds nice. So you want, once you have a website and a printed resource, then you can really demonstrate what you're trying to do. So this is just last week.
My name is Joshua Ogure. I'm the coordinator for Mount Kibera Trust. Mount Kibera Trust started in 2009 when we got registered.
The launch was beneficial in that it would make the website official so that people would start using it.
I'm happy that you are here to help us launch this Kibera education data portal today.
this is a very comprehensive way of dealing with issues that affect our people. That's the only where the policy making is going on here in Peru. Me, I would want to commend you for the work that you've done, and that we can collaborate in highlighting these issues and collaborate in ways that we can expound on this.
So, thank you, Makibera. We cannot have developed it if it's not measurable. We cannot say, when I was MP, I did better when it can't be measured. Access to information and proper credible information is very important. One of the key things you hear and that has been annoying me for a long time and most recently is the amount of wrong information that is spread about Kibra. I refer them to check Mark Kibera Trust for verifiable information. It is done through clear methods, through real people on the ground, not researchers speculating or fundraisers speculating about our community. So Kibera to me is not a problem. Kibera is actually the solution to the fact that there is not enough adequate housing in Kenya.
Also, I want to commit myself and the county government to supporting this project.
Through this project, I've been able to make informed choice of which school to take my children to.
As a parent, I'm able to make various choices in terms of I'm able to know where the schools are, and I also am able to compare which schools have the highest number of students. And to me, I think a school having the highest number of students, to me, it means that maybe the quality of education is not as good as the one compared with the lowest number of students.
And it's going to help us as teachers and even as a community at large, because whichever information we want to maybe get, it's at hand. We even have a website where you can get more information given.
The project has been really good, and we hope to do more in Kibera, especially to do more updates, because Kibera is a very dynamic place. Things keep changing now and then.
As a parent, I can see this project is a unique one, and it is very much important to us as the community, and especially those people who are having pupils in different schools within the Kibera.
Okay, here we are. You can look at that and make an informed choice. Which school you want to send this to? So this is a very, very significant effort made by the chief out here.
And just advise that probably this will be the first phase. The second phase look at Mukuru.
We would also like to continue with this project to other places. We would like to scale up to other informal settlements of Nairobi.
I would like this project to continue because I believe it is a way, it can be used as an advocacy tool.
The challenge should be how do you continuously update the information. If you do not update the information, this becomes irrelevant. All efforts to best actually.
So just one comment there. I just wanted to make sure something that came through on that video that you might not be totally aware of, but I mean, Kibera itself is kind of a very contested place, and the numbers about it are very contested. The MP that spoke there was responding to a movie that just came out by Nick Kristof that focused on Kibera, partly on Kibera, and there was a lot of statistics given, and people were very upset that they thought that those statistics were off. He actually made some corrections on the website associated to the video since then. So it's actually something that I was kind of reminded of being there last week, was just that, you know, people actually, they do care about this information and they want it, and they realize that a lot of people have been studying their society for many years and come and go and bring research out with them. So just having access to it is, you know, I don't know if there's just sort of an assumption that people that live in a very poor place don't care about data, but they actually kind of do. I mean, they do. That's what was shown to me last week, and over and over again over the past 5 or 6 years. So with that said, I want to invite Jean-Louis to introduce the questions before you. Okay, we can do Q&A, and then you can wrap up in a few minutes. How about that? I'm assuming people will have some questions because it's really hard to cover everything. And if you don't, think of one. Okay, there's one. Maybe
just say who you are.
Is the mic on?
Who are you?
I'm Mark Maxon. Mark Maxmeister. I changed my name. I forget. And I noticed that you chose not to put up ratings on the schools, and I was wondering if you would comment on that choice, and then if you wanted to put a rating system together, what criteria would you rank as the most important based on parent feedback?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea of the rating system was kind of what I was alluding to as, I think it needs, we need to be cautious about it, basically. So all we were able to do, I mean, this was just a pilot grant we got for this, and it really, all we were able to do was find out whether parents wanted to provide that kind of information and whether schools would sort of tolerate it. So those two things we assessed. We found that we thought it was a green light we could go ahead with, but actually rating them, so yeah, that's another stage of development, and I'm sure that with what you're working on might be useful to that, or if anyone else is working on such things, because the other thing is we're not education experts, so we want to also be careful that we don't sort of put out such a reading, even if it's just, people's opinion. We want to kind of follow, maybe partner with more experts on education. So in general, that's been kind of our objective. We work on the data, the information, and the sector experts need to come in and kind of advise, but yeah, so.
Hi, Nathaniel from Results Development. Actually, on that, I mean, there are interesting experiences from a number of middle-income countries. I'm thinking of Mexico, where to take it to the next step by putting where there are standardized test scores and layering that on, you drive huge social action from parents and teachers and others. I mean, that's controversial for certain reasons, but that, the rating stuff gets tricky. But just putting out other layers of data that exist, if they do, that there's been huge, interesting successes, even when there's very powerful from teachers unions and others involved, that has really shaped. Driven sort of market forces around some of these data. So that's just one idea. The basic question: what do we know, if anything, about sort of web usage and web access in a community like Kibera? What's the expectation around people getting to the site and accessing data, pulling it down or not? I'm sure you've thought through all this, but just curious, it didn't come out.
Sure. Well, first on this, in terms of standardized tests, one of the main issues with assessing school quality in the slums is that they don't have any. They don't participate in the standardized testing regime, which is pretty critical to the whole country. I mean, they participate to the level that they're able to send kids to testing centers, and then those kids can get a score, say it's kind of like their SAT type of thing, but the school can't be associated to that score at the moment. So there's really no way to know if the school itself is performing, which is kind of crazy. I mean, some of them might be part of it, but that would only be the very top tier of schools that would be part of that system. And about access, so this has been something that we've tackled from day one with Map Kibera, and it's actually why we put the comment field as Facebook. So this is what we're always so frustrated with Facebook, but it's like our lifeline in a way, because Facebook is still the main, it basically is the internet in Kibera and in a lot of Kenya too. So that was one way that we thought, well, parents can be sort of associated to their school on Facebook, and then they can make the comments that way. Of course, if we're doing a more formal rating system with like slightly more complicated factors, that's not going to work. And we ultimately thought, well, just promoting comments on Facebook to the school, probably not the way to go forward, but we're always trying to tackle this. So in terms of access, we did actually do like a re-survey about that in the beginning when we did the education survey. I think we found, parents are still not accessing the web most of the time. So that means that we need to bring resources, like what we've always done with the print maps, with, community forums and kind of public meetings, the information has to be brought out. That can include bringing a computer with a modem in it to show the website. I mean, parents aren't like they're computer literate to that level, but it requires that outreach at key points. Another thing we're doing is painting. What we've done before also is paint a map on the wall. So there's like a lot of wall space, so you can paint where the schools are. But we're also testing out something this month actually with sort of graffiti artists if we can do actual statistics and some of this type of summary statistics as a wall graphic. So ways to kind of get data out there at least. And with teachers, it was a higher level of even some of them having Android phones and so forth. So there's a little bit more of a chance that they can view the site or they can contribute data. It's kind of creeping up basically slowly, but it's still not like, don't imagine that everyone has a smartphone in Kibera, because they don't. I think that's the primary thing about that.
How you doing, Clarence? I do a little bit of work with a school in Machakos, Kenya, and I didn't really get a chance to see all your categories there, but I'm just kind of curious, like where we might fit in there, or if you accounted for these types of organizations. So on one hand, we do vocational training, but kind of the secondary level, we really just provide uniforms and meals to students, so that they can then. So that's not so that we kind of take that off the table as a reason that they aren't actually in the formal school system. Are those types of organizations captured in there, and kind of what would you tag those as?
That's a good point. So I'm thinking like down here in programs, at the moment we just have these that we measured. Scouts, I guess we captured. So yeah, I mean, if they are actually able to have a supplementary kind of program that might attract them to that school.
Well, in a sense, so we don't teach the kids at that level. We just provide uniforms and feeding programs so that they're able to go to the schools that may not provide that for them in there. So kind of an enabling resource, if you will.
I see. So
school adjacent.
That's the kind of thing that could also be on an education, a themed education map here too. Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, this is first pass beta kind of project, so we're definitely taking. This is our chance to get people to tell us what we can do better. So that's a good idea.
Hi, Kathleen Schmerman from the International Republican Institute. Thank you very much for the very interesting discussion and presentation. We don't focus on particular sectors, but through our work in Kenya specifically, we do a lot of governance work, and so that clearly touches on service delivery. Specifically, working in Kilifi and Kwale counties, we focus specifically on engaging citizens and government officials on education. And so my question is kind of two-part in kind of next steps and vision that you all have, both in terms of geographically where you'd like to expand. I know you've mentioned a few times that it's Open Schools Kenya for a reason, and that you'd like to expand this to other communities. And then also sort of the end goal in terms of expected behavior change. Is it really looking to engage the parents? I know you mentioned both parents and policymakers. I mean, for IRI's purposes, I see this as a great tool in terms of accountability. I know one thing that came up a lot in our work on the coast was we're working with these county assembly members that are now, responsible for early development childhood education. The national government's still responsible for the rest, and they couldn't tell you where these early childhood education centers are. They don't know how many are in their county. So that in and of itself is clearly a great resource. But I'm just curious if could this be used as an accountability tool for citizens to say, hey, you said you're going to build so many schools and we don't see it, or if it's more about quality of school education and giving parents options.
I mean, I kind of want to ask like the rest of my team, but maybe Jean-Louis wants to comment on it.
Well, I think that this what is unique in this work is the fact that there is a team on the ground that has the credibility, that has been there for a little while, and that has built enough trust with the schools, with the parents, so that they can provide that information. I think when Mikhail went and you can share the experience, talk to parents, everybody wanted to have information, but the most important, the accountability part in terms of quality and all the rest of it, is something that they're not ready for quite yet, in the sense that they are very concerned, at least the concerns that were expressed and reported to us after Mikhail went and talked to some of them, is some of the schools are afraid that, because it's also a business, that if the ratings are not good, or if somebody has a grudge with a particular, because their kids was not there, then you are going to get. So we really don't have yet the proper feedback mechanism for that. Now, in terms of what you were saying about pre-primary education, or I think that this is, I don't know if there are any such centers in the area, but we could use that team to find that information. What was very interesting to me as Erica was talking back and bringing back the news from the launch in Nairobi, was the fact that the education establishment was very interested in seeing that information, because if you play on the site and you put the compare, you're going to see a lot of empty right-hand column. They just don't have any information. And so, and that really prompted a lot of the people in Kibera to really go after poor Nicholas Kristof with a vengeance, saying, you don't know what you're talking about, and so that information is useful to a certain extent. It may also overstate the education offering. It may overstate the quality of the education. It may overstate the way in which people can then go into secondary and why not post-secondary education. So all of these things are what we were hoping to do later on. The first thing was to establish an answer to the question, do people want to give that information? Can it be shown in a way that makes sense to them? And the answer to that is yes. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Daniel Clout. I'm also with Results for Development, and I can relate to a couple of the points that you've made about rating the schools. We have an initiative called the Center for Education Innovations, where we catalog up a lot of education innovations, and we similarly kind of come to that struggle with the fact that we can't necessarily verify how efficient a lot of these schools or programs are. So I think I can relate to that challenge. One challenge that I wanted to ask you about that you might have that's also similar is we face the challenge of actually keeping our data up to date so that it's so useful. And if I think the theory of change of this model kind of goes through, it'll mean that actually parents change their behavior and the numbers change overall for the fees that are associated with each school and the children per school. So I'm curious what your plan is in terms of actually incentivizing updates going forward so that the database kind of stays relevant.
Well, I mean, I think that is one of the primary things that could come out of this model, is that since each school, it's mostly going to be the schools that would report changes, and they're actually the ones that have reported this data in the first place. So on the one level, it is self-reported, but that's also the case with the official data that schools report, formal schools report to the government. But in this case, they have a page now. So this kind of, the idea here is like, that's them. I mean, most of them have a photo, almost all of them have a photo. If they don't have a photo, it's because they didn't want their photo taken, and probably they'll write us now, or they'll see that their photo's missing and they'll want it now. So it's their web presence. Almost, some of them, that's their only web presence, most of them. So the idea is that like they can kind of take a certain ownership over the accuracy of that page. And ideally, we can also add more things to that page. Like, it doesn't have to just be that raw data. You know, we could also have, I don't know, a story about the school or something a little more soft and contextual narrative type of information. So that's the incentive process, we think, for the schools. And then, of course, it's the team. It's having, I mean, and when I say team, I'm not talking about like 20 people full time or something. I'm talking about like, I think 6 people part time. You know, it's not, and that's for 300 schools. So it's not like a massive manpower kind of thing to just kind of go around, remind the schools of what is up there and see if something has changed. You know, not constantly, but a couple times a year maybe. Even once a year would be a huge improvement. Yeah, so that's what we want to see in the future. And the amount of resources that takes to sustain is pretty minuscule compared to like doing an entire, I don't know, baseline study over and over again. So yeah, that's the hope. And then it's also just that it's, you know, as people use the web more, they use social media a lot more. In Nairobi, for example, they are more visible, and they want to make sure that, you know, they want to protect their reputation. Meanwhile, people in Kibera are more likely to notice if somebody is lying, basically. I think there's a sort of built-in accountability thing going on there. People kind of check each other. They don't want somebody getting away with something in their own backyard. So that's another thing about making this visible. I mean, this data is not what, this is data that people probably have. And who has it? It's international NGOs that have done a baseline study. And how many have done this exact same data collection, plus probably a bunch more in 2014? Probably 10. I mean, that might sound crazy, but I bet there's 10 NGOs that have gone to every school in Kibera. I mean, it's crazy the amount of, I mean, this is a particularly weird case because Kibera gets studied a lot more than most places, but it's different when it's actually out there, and most of that data is just pocketed away. That's my pitch for open data. Okay. Somebody else is good.
It is so great to see this come together, and congrats to the whole team. Given the potential, I think, from more informed parents on the possible consolidation of schools, if not by performance, as you said, then maybe by facilitating when lunch is provided. I'm curious as to how those of us working with Cody and the Kenya Open Data Initiative and with the ministries can help to make sure that this data is pushed up to Cody, and more importantly, I'm wondering about what commitments have been made. We saw the acknowledgments from government officials, but I'm wondering if any further commitments have been made, and how we can kind of help push those forward.
Well, Rob, I'm glad you asked that. Getting the commitment is always the, you know, the final part. So as I think I mentioned, we did go around inside the Ministry of Education, which we've never been able to access. I mean, this is like a really big deal for us because I don't know, it's hard to access the Kenyan government basically. And they were excited, and I think, you know, we're kind of moving forward next steps with them, which means basically meeting with more people and kind of moving up the chain to the extent that we can. And then other kind of government reps at county level. I mean, it's very complicated. There's devolved government. So, but we also met with the country director of the bank there, who's a friend of John Louise, actually, from back in the day. So it's like amazing. And she was really amazing as well. And so I think that really it's like now we just want to keep this kind of in their ears. And then I think it's really like your team and other teams at the bank that can advise us on what's the best. Because I know that they're trying to do more with Kenya Open Data. They haven't quite signed on yet. They're kind of in the not sure. Maybe this is a push to that. I mean, maybe they see this. I know we got a nice tweet from Kenya Open Data. I don't know who's tweeting for them, but somebody noticed it. Yeah, but I think really getting this, what I was advised while there was like, you know, once the education ministry is excited about it, then they want it to happen. Then they come to, say, the bank or these different donors, and they kind of help you with that as well. I don't know if we quite got there, but we definitely got their eyes open. It was like they had never seen this information before, and I don't think that they had. So we didn't know that. So yeah, let's follow up. And anyone else too. One more maybe, then we should. Well, actually, then I'd like John to move up. Yeah, and this is here.
Thank you, Erica. The first thing I want to do, we've seen the folks from the Kibera team on the screen, but I want to acknowledge, and we've seen Erica, and who has been sort of putting all of this together. I want to give a shout out to Mikkel, who has been doing some of the work, and Janko, who's been working on the site, and Ben back there, who's been doing a lot of the technical work, and I hope that Phil, who is is still with us, and
our photographer, James Conklin.
The photographer. So this really has been a team effort, and the questions that you asked are, to me, I have to give a useful reminder that this is a proof of concept project. That what we wanted to show is that it is possible to match very top-down, very heavy, very imperfect information coming from Open Kenya, and done in a way that was a little surprising. How we found out, that they would drive to find this information, and they would stop wherever their SUV would no longer go and decide that this is it, as opposed to really getting some from the bottom up information. And the tension for us was, how is the government going to respond to that information coming from the ground? And the very pleasant surprise that we got, and that you saw, is that actually there has been a very positive response, because they could see that this information is useful to them, in particular to the local officials, who usually are very interested in getting education services or whatever social service delivered to the population that they are responsible for. Now, the challenge for us, now that we have that proof of concept, now that we have demonstrated that it is possible, that it is useful, and that it meets a series of demands from parents, from teachers, from school owners, and from the education department, is how do we not do what everybody does, which is to do this pilot and then walk away. And so that the challenge now, and I'm looking to our friends from the big sister institution down the hall, I have tried, for example, to get the education this education sector group in Kenya interested in this, because there ought to be a way to scale things up, and I'm trying to use whatever contact I still have to do this, but Koshal, Rob, I see you there, and I want to put you on the spot a bit to say, how can we really see how this kind of an experiment can be talked about first, and I'm sure that if it's talked about in places like the DFID or the World Bank, we might get a sense of doing something next. Now, in terms of our own design was to go this proof of concept, which I think we have thanks to the work of the team, and we were hoping, and this was the original design, that there would be a phase 2 funded by our friends at the Gates Foundation, who are also very excited by what they've seen. But the Gates Foundation, being the Gates Foundation, they've decided that this is no longer a priority for them. So they congratulate us on the work, and they say, we'll help you find somebody to do the next. So my plea to some of you who may know sources of funding that may be interested in continuing that work, whether it is within the education sector or whether it is the methodology that can be applied to really match top-down and bottom-up data, which I think we're all very interested in seeing. I think we'd be very, very happy to get some leads from you. What has been very interesting, and we'll post this on the website, has been the reaction. The Mr. Open Kenya, the guy who spoke here, the former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Communication, went to the launch and really pushed really for the fact that he was very happy, and so was the MP representing Kibera, that we had all this information. And that in and of itself began to puncture a number of myths about what is in Kibera, what are the services that are being offered there. So, you know, it was great that we could have these people, because we have built, in addition to the local folks in Kibera itself, we have built some higher level support in people who are in the Open Kenya community in the country. So hopefully something will happen. Now, the biggest lesson for me is really, I don't think we could have done this without the fact that our colleagues at the Ground Truth Initiative have really this long-term relationship. In fact, are the co-founders of MAP Kibera, and having an organization that you know, to coin a phrase, that can move like fish in water in this area has really given this project some credibility that we may not have had automatically if we simply came and did what Eric had described, which is get a lot of information and never give back that information to the community. So the challenge that Nathaniel underlined is, since this is all a website, how can we find ways to really make sure that people have that information? And maybe a roundabout way to do it is to make it something that other people who have easier access to connectivity, who have easier access to the web, can do this and talk about it, so that it comes back to the Kibera community and gets more visibility. So I am both very excited about how this project has really taken off the ground thanks to the team, and very worried at the same time, because I think we have created expectations that we really have a moral obligation to meet them and to really continue, because all of you have said, yes, what are your next phase? So we have a lot of ideas of what we would like to do and continue. We're looking for the funding that will allow us to do this. Otherwise, the risk and the danger is that it becomes another one of these projects that creates expectations in an area where people are often given to believe that things are going to happen and not see it happen. So, you know, please, if you have any ideas, any leads, let us know. We'll be happy to follow up. And the challenge is really, in addition to the money, is to find the way in which we do two things. One is to keep the data alive and fresh, because as many people said, Kibera changes all the time. And the second one, and this is where Feedback Labs comes in, is really to design a feedback mechanism that really allows a quality judgment, and I use the word judgment very advisedly, to this information. So if the goal is to really help parents make better informed decisions about where they need to send their kids to school so they can learn something, we need to have a way to have feedback from the owners, the teacher, the parents, in a way that they're comfortable with, and that they will believe that the results that comes out is one that is useful for all these various and sometimes not convergent communities. So thanks again to the team for doing this, and please help us continue.
Just in case you're worried, we're not going to let it just like fall off the cliff right now. So somehow we've managed to not do that over 6 years in Kibera with Map Kibera, but it's not without, I don't know, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So, but we're also looking for partners, organizations that some of you may work for that just think this is a cool idea. So come talk to me after this, and let's have some more food, because there's a lot of it left.
I've never actually seen
Over the years, yeah, you should get that. Anytime you want. Anytime. You can share.